Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
This video is about a peace talks that didn't start well. It began with a meeting between leaders in a White House. After this meeting, things became difficult. There was a disagreement between the leaders of the U.S. and Ukraine. This conflict has been very hard for many people. People on all sides have suffered. Many have lost their homes and their families. The conflict has caused pain and sadness. At first, people hoped that the conflict would end quickly. There was hope for a fast solution and peace. However, this did not happen. The conflict continued for a long time. It became a long war instead of a quick end. This conflict has also had effects around the world. It has changed the economy in many countries. It has also changed how countries work together. The world has had to change because of this conflict. This video will explore how things changed and what happened next. 2. The meeting. The meeting took place in Jeddah, a city by the sea in Saudi Arabia. It was a place where people hoped to find peace again after a difficult time between the U.S. and Ukraine. Last month, there was a meeting between the leaders of the U.S. and Ukraine, but it did not go well. This time, Ukraine sent Andriy Yermak, who is a top helper to President Zelensky. The U.S. sent Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. They came together to talk and try to fix things. The meeting lasted for a long time, about 8 hours. People wanted to see if they could agree on how to stop the fighting. After many hours of talking, Ukraine and the U.S. made a joint statement. In this statement, Ukraine said they were ready for a ceasefire. A ceasefire means stopping the shooting and fighting. Ukraine agreed to stop fighting for 30 days. This was suggested by the U.S. But for this to happen, Russia also needed to agree to stop fighting. Ukraine said they wanted 3 things to happen to have real peace. First, they wanted silence in the sky. This means stopping missiles, bombs, and drone attacks. Second, they wanted silence at sea. Third, they wanted actions to build trust, like releasing prisoners of war and bringing back Ukrainian children who were taken to Russia. The U.S. also made a promise. They said they would start sharing information with Ukraine again. They also said they would give security help to Ukraine again. Before, the U.S. stopped sharing information and giving some help to put pressure on Ukraine to talk about peace. Now, the U.S. said they would restart this support. The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said that the U.S. offer was now with Russia. He said it was Russia's turn to say yes to peace. He hoped Russia would agree quickly so they could start real talks to end the war. The meeting in Jeddah was seen as a positive step. It showed that Ukraine and the U.S. were talking again and trying to find a way to stop the fighting. 3. Ukraine's view. For Ukraine, peace is very important. President Zelensky has said many times that Ukraine wants peace. From the first day of the war, Ukraine has wanted to stop the fighting. After a meeting in Saudi Arabia, Ukraine agreed to a plan for a ceasefire. This plan was suggested by the United States. Ukraine's leader, Zelensky, explained what Ukraine wants for this ceasefire to work. He talked about 3 main things that are important for Ukraine. First, Zelensky wants silence in the skies. This means that Russia should stop missile attacks, bombing, and drone attacks from the air. Ukraine has been suffering from these attacks, and stopping them is very important for people's safety. Second, he wants silence at sea. This means stopping any military actions in the sea. Ukraine has a coastline, and peace at sea is important for trade and security. Third, Zelensky talked about real confidence-building measures. One important measure is to release all prisoners of war and people who are detained. He also wants all Ukrainian children who were taken to Russia to be returned to their families in Ukraine. These are important steps to build trust and show that both sides are serious about peace. Zelensky has asked Russia to agree to the ceasefire. He said that Ukraine sees this proposal as a good step forward. Ukraine is ready to take this step if Russia also agrees. Zelensky made it clear that Ukraine has always wanted peace. They want to do everything they can to achieve peace as soon as possible. But it is also important for this peace to be strong and lasting, so that the war does not start again in the future. Alexander Mereshko, a member of the Ukrainian parliament, also spoke about Ukraine's hopes. He said that Ukraine hopes this agreement will help to improve the relationship between Ukraine and the United States. Ukraine also hopes that the U.S. will continue to give military and other help. Mereshko talked about possible compromises. He said that any compromises must be within the limits of international law and Ukraine's own laws. This means Ukraine is ready to talk and find solutions, but they will not agree to anything that goes against important rules and principles. For Ukraine, this ceasefire plan is a chance to stop the fighting and start talking about a real end to the war. They hope Russia will also see this as a chance for peace. 4. Russia's response. The United States decided to send their ceasefire offer to Russia using different ways. They planned to make sure Russia received the message clearly. Mike Waltz, a security advisor from the U.S., was going to talk to his Russian counterparts soon. Also, Steve Witkoff, a special envoy, planned to travel to Moscow. He wanted to meet with President Putin to discuss the proposal directly. However, it was not clear how Russia would react to this peace offer. People were unsure if Russia would agree to stop fighting. Even after the ceasefire announcement, something happened that made the situation more complicated. During the night, Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, was attacked from the air. Air defense systems tried to stop these attacks. This happened even though there was talk of a ceasefire. Despite the attack, the Russian Foreign Ministry made a statement. They said they were not against having contact with representatives from the United States in the coming days. This meant they might still be open to discussions, even after the Kyiv attack. In the past, President Putin had spoken about peace talks. He had said he was ready to talk, but he also had conditions. One important point was that he was not ready to give back any land that Russia claimed as its own. He wanted a deal that would protect Russia's security for a long time. This made it seem difficult to find a solution that both sides would accept. Steve Rosenberg, a journalist who knows Russia well, gave his view. He said that the war had changed how Russia felt about its own security. Because of the war, Russia might see things differently now. It was unclear how this would affect their decision about the ceasefire offer. People waited to see if Russia would agree to stop the fighting and start talking about peace. The world was watching to see what Russia's answer would be. 5. World reaction. Other countries in the world watched closely after the ceasefire proposal was announced. Many leaders gave their opinions on this news. Ursula von der Leyen, who was the head of the European Union Commission, said that the news from Jeddah was good. She welcomed the talks between Ukraine and the U.S. She also mentioned the proposal for a ceasefire and the plan to start giving Ukraine intelligence and security help again. Von der Leyen said this was a positive development. She thought it could be a step towards peace in Ukraine. She also said that now it is Russia's turn to act. The European Union, she said, is ready to help in the peace talks with other countries. Keir Starmer, a leader in Britain, also spoke about the ceasefire proposal. He said he was happy that Ukraine agreed to a 30-day ceasefire. Starmer also pointed out that it was now up to Russia to stop the fighting. Starmer said that both the U.S. and Ukraine said clearly that Russia needs to respond. He congratulated both President Zelensky of Ukraine and President Trump of the U.S. for making progress. Starmer also mentioned that Britain would hold a meeting of world leaders soon to talk about what to do next. He said Britain is ready to assist in ending the war in a fair and lasting way. This would allow Ukraine to be free and safe. The conflict in Ukraine is not just a problem for Ukraine and Russia. It affects the whole world. Many countries are interested in peace. The international community has a role to play in helping to find a solution. The reactions from leaders like von der Leyen and Starmer show that the world is paying attention and wants to see an end to the war. They see the ceasefire proposal as a chance for peace and are waiting to see how Russia will respond. The next steps will depend on Russia's decision and the continued efforts of all countries involved. 6. The talks. After the meeting in Jeddah, Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz spoke to reporters. They seemed positive about how the talks went. Mr. Rubio said that the meeting was a chance to see how serious Ukraine was about peace. He wanted to understand what Ukraine needed for peace to happen. Mr. Rubio explained that the main goal of the United States was to stop the war. He said, "The shooting has to stop." He mentioned that Ukraine had agreed to a 30-day ceasefire. This was a proposal from the U.S. Ukraine accepted it as a way to start peace talks. Mr. Waltz added that Ukraine showed they shared President Trump's wish for peace. He said Ukraine wants to end the fighting and the deaths. Mr. Waltz said Ukraine made real steps and suggestions during the meeting. They talked about a complete ceasefire and how to make sure the war ends for good. They also discussed what Ukraine needs for its safety and future. A key point was the problem of help from the U.S. Before the talks, the U.S. had stopped sharing intelligence and giving security help to Ukraine. Mr. Rubio said that because of the positive meeting, President Trump decided to restart this help. He said the pause on aid was lifted immediately. This was seen as a good sign after Ukraine agreed to the ceasefire proposal. Ukraine wanted to make sure any ceasefire would work. They were worried that Russia might not keep its promise. So Ukraine asked for a system to watch over the ceasefire. They wanted the United States to help with this system. This shows Ukraine's concern about trusting Russia. The talks happened just after a drone attack on Moscow. This attack was a reminder of how serious the war is. It showed that the war was affecting both Ukraine and Russia. Even though the talks were about peace, the ongoing fighting was still in the background. The drone attack highlighted the need to stop the violence as soon as possible. Mr. Rubio said the U.S. would now take the ceasefire offer to Russia. He said it was Russia's turn to say yes to peace. He hoped Russia would agree quickly so that real talks about ending the war could begin. He said the U.S. objective was for the war to end, and Ukraine had taken a step towards that. Mr. Waltz mentioned that President Trump had started this peace effort by talking to both President Putin and President Zelensky. He said this shuttle diplomacy would continue. Mr. Waltz said he would speak to his Russian counterpart soon. Mr. Rubio would talk to G7 foreign ministers. The NATO Secretary General was also going to visit the White House. These meetings showed that many countries were involved in trying to find a peaceful solution. Both Mr. Rubio and Mr. Waltz stressed that President Trump wanted peace above everything else. They said he was ready to take strong steps to achieve this. They believed that getting both sides to stop fighting was the first important step towards real peace talks. They hoped Russia would agree to the ceasefire offer and join the peace process. 7. Past problems. In the past, the relationship between the United States and Ukraine has not always been easy. There was a time when things became very tense between the two countries. This happened during a meeting in the Oval Office, the U.S. President's office. After this meeting, there were some problems. The U.S. decided to stop giving some help to Ukraine. This help included sharing important information, called intelligence sharing, and also security assistance. This was a difficult time because Ukraine needed this support. The reason for this tension was different ideas about the war. The U.S. and Ukraine did not always agree on how things were going and what should be done to achieve peace. Some people in the U.S. thought the war was not progressing well. They also had different ideas about what conditions were needed to start peace talks. One person, Nate Vance, shared his view on this. He did not agree with how the meeting in the Oval Office was handled. He had a different perspective on the war and the relationship between the two countries. These past problems created a difficult situation. It was important for both countries to find a way to move forward and fix their relationship. The suspension of aid and the disagreements about peace made things complicated. However, despite these difficulties, there was still a need for the U.S. and Ukraine to work together, especially to find a way to end the war. Understanding these past problems is important to understand what happens next and how the relationship can improve in the future. 8. Looking ahead. The agreement for a 30-day ceasefire between Ukraine and the United States has been made. This is a significant step, but the future path is still unclear. The most pressing question is Russia's response. Will Russia agree to stop the fighting? This decision is now in Russia's hands and is crucial for what happens next. If Russia agrees to the ceasefire, it could be the start of important negotiations. These talks would aim to find a lasting end to the war. However, achieving a real and lasting peace is a big challenge. Many difficult issues need to be solved. Finding solutions that both Ukraine and Russia find acceptable will be a complex and lengthy process. One major challenge is building trust. The relationship between Ukraine, Russia, and even the U.S. has been damaged. Past events, including disagreements and broken agreements, have created distrust. Rebuilding trust will take time, patience, and honest effort from all sides. It is necessary to create a positive atmosphere where serious talks can take place. Another significant challenge is the different views on what peace means. Ukraine wants a peace that truly protects its future and prevents any return to war. Russia may have different ideas about the conditions for peace, including its own security concerns and territorial demands. Finding common ground between these different positions will be very difficult. International countries and organizations are also important players in the future. The European Union has welcomed the ceasefire proposal as a good first step and is ready to be involved in peace negotiations. Britain has also offered its help to bring the war to an end. The support and involvement of these international actors, along with others, can be very important. They can help to support the peace process, encourage dialogue, and work towards a stable and lasting agreement. The conflict has already had long-term consequences for everyone involved. Ukraine has experienced immense suffering, with loss of life, damage to cities, and disruption to normal life. Russia is also facing significant impacts from the war, including economic and international pressure. The global economy has been affected, with changes in energy markets and food supplies impacting countries worldwide. The full long-term effects of this conflict on Ukraine, Russia, and the world are still unfolding and uncertain. The coming weeks and months will be critical. The decisions made by leaders in this period will shape the future for many years to come. It is widely hoped that these decisions will prioritize a path towards a stable and lasting peace, not just for Ukraine and Russia, but for the stability and security of the entire international community. The world is watching closely, hoping that this ceasefire can be the first real step towards a peaceful and secure future for all.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.